The challenge of creativity for scapegoat survivors of narcissistic parents. Do you want to express yourself creatively but find it hard to actually do so? Do you grow anxious and fearful when you try to create? Do you criticize your creative work so much that it makes you not want to continue? To be creative is to access the core of who we are. Creating comes from within. It can feel like putting your stamp on the world, saying, this is something original that came from me. For some, the need to create can feel like a demand that must be met in order to feel at peace. Well, scapegoat children to a narcissistic parent are often forbidden from being creative. This child has to identify as the devalued person their narcissistic parent will only recognize. These children must deny the creative impulses that could lead to a demonstration of worth in the world. The scapegoat child does not do this consciously. They are convinced that they have nothing of value to creatively express. Denying the value of their creativity solves the scapegoat child's problem of staying in relationship to their narcissistic parent, but creates other problems. In today's video, I explain how the scapegoat child and later the survivor learns to associate being creative with three punishments. The first punishment is their parents' vindictive attack for showing off. The second punishment is feeling like nobody to no one. And the third punishment is feeling psychologically lost because creativity does not seem like a real part of their identity. To recover, the scapegoat survivor needs to turn inward towards their creative impulses again. They also need to be in relationships that support them. Last, I'll explain how therapy can offer such a relationship and how scapegoat survivors can make use of it to restore their own creativity. Well, my name is Jay Reed, and I'm a licensed psychotherapist in California, and I specialize in recovery from narcissistic abuse. In my professional and personal experience, I've worked to identify the fundamentals to the process of recovery. And this has led me to what I call the three pillars of recovery. Pillar number one is making sense of what happened to eventually know it wasn't your fault. Pillar number two is moving away from narcissistic abusers and towards safe people. And pillar number three is living in defiance of the narcissist rules. It's also essential to find and participate in communities of people who can get, validate, and support you on this path. I've both seen and experienced large improvements in quality of life after applying these pillars. I also like to mention that I'm offering a new free ebook called 4 Ways to Heal for Adult Scapegoat Survivors. And in it, I offer 4 strategies to reclaim your authentic self from the fake and painful scapegoat identity, learn and apply the science behind gaining distance from narcissistic abusers, know the secret to reducing social anxiety for scapegoat survivors, and how to accept yourself as the fallible and valuable person you are. You can find the link to the book in the description box below. The dilemma of the creative scapegoat child and survivor. Someone with a desire to create can feel like a part of them is missing if they cannot do so. A creative person relates to the world like it's a canvas that they want to populate with their creations. To be prevented from doing this is to feel stifled from realizing an essential part of oneself. The creative scapegoat child and survivor have to live in this stifled way. Their narcissistic parents insist that they operate as though they have no value. This arrangement allows the parent to relocate their own lack of value into the child. Relocating their own worthlessness into the child makes the parent feel less endangered by these feelings. The scapegoat child must comply by identifying as worthless. Being creative demonstrates worth, and this would severely strain their relationship to the parent. Let's look at another anonymized case example to illustrate. Alina loved visual art for as long as she could remember. Her eye would naturally wander to pictures in her environment. These pictures would swim in her mind as she would modify them in the ways she wanted. Once she had the perfect picture in her mind, she had to draw it. Alina's father seemed to stand in her way no matter what she did. If he saw her doing something that felt meaningful to her, he would interfere. He saw the world through the lens of asking how he could turn a situation to his advantage. He saw the world through the lens of asking how could he turn a situation to his advantage. One way he felt advantaged was to see others frustrated or defeated while he did not feel these ways. This made him feel superior and was very gratifying to him. Alina's father's opinion seemed to be the only one that mattered in their home. Her mother tiptoed around him and did not show much interest in Alina. Her father's approach to life tragically extended to Alina's drawing. If she was drawing and her father came into the room, he would pull the paper from her, look at it, and sneer. He might say something like, "What is this supposed to look like?" And she might say, "It's a frog sitting on a lily pad." And he would reply, "If you say so," as he might drop the paper to Alina and walk out of the room. Well, in these instances, Alina felt like her energy had been suddenly dissipated. She felt weighted down and very still. It seemed impossible to move to do anything, let alone continue to draw. After a few minutes of this freeze response, she would come to. Her desire to draw, though, was still absent. She just felt like going in her room and trying to fall asleep. Well, in this episode, Alina's zeal in drawing seemed to threaten her father. Her fulfillment could have evoked his envy or punctured his ability to see her as inferior. As episodes like this continued in her childhood, she would eventually stop drawing. She would still have the pictures come to her mind. She would tolerate and try to numb the pain of not being able to get these pictures onto paper as she wanted. Over time, the pain of not drawing lessened, but so did her ability to feel much at all. 3 punishments for the scapegoat child's creativity. The scapegoat child faces 3 punishments if they demonstrate their creativity. First, getting attacked. The child's passion for their creative pursuits may remind the narcissistic parent of that parent's own lack of passion in their lives. This can trigger envy of the child. The parent can solve this painful state of envy by spoiling the child's passion to create. They may humiliate the child for attempting to be creative, as Alina's fathers did. As the child grows deflated, the parent is then spared further envy. Now the child no longer seems to have what the parent lacks and therefore is not the object of envy to the parent. Another basis for attack can be the threat posed by the scapegoat child showing their worth by being creative. This is a threat to the narcissistic parent because the scapegoat child must seem worthless for the parent to feel good about themselves. If the scapegoat child deviates from seeming like the worthless one in the family, then the parent may have no one to relocate their own poor self-esteem into. Now the parent may attack and blame the child as a means towards the end of getting the child back to feeling worthless. Either way, the child learns that expressing their creativity results in getting attacked. The second punishment is being nobody to no one. The only identity available to the scapegoat child is one of being defective and undeserving. Being creative does not go along with this identity. The child can feel at grave psychological risk if they deviate from the way their parent knows them. This is true even when the parent knows them in a way that is false and devaluing. It's always better to be a devalued somebody to a superior someone than nobody to no one. The third punishment is getting lost. A scapegoat child did not have their creative attributes noticed and affirmed by their parent. As such, they may feel fraudulent and like an imposter to themselves when they try to be creative. In order for us to feel like our traits are real, we need them to be seen as real by the people closest to us. The merit of the scapegoat child's creative talent is wholly denied in the family. Instead, they're forced to wear the costume of being to blame for all the family's problems, the costume of being the scapegoat. If the child's creativity is not recognized as a true quality by their parent, then how can it seem real to the child? What does get recognized in the family are the child's supposed flaws and mistakes. Scapegoat children and survivors may feel a wordless dread about proceeding with their creative gifts. Some of this danger may reflect the person venturing into psychological territory that has not been recognized as a part of who they are. Leaving who you know yourself to be, even if it's a suffering-filled identity, can at times feel like a psychological death. Well, let's go back to Alina again to further illustrate. She willed herself away from creative outlets in her life. She didn't sign up for art classes to avoid her father's derision. She poured herself into the subjects he did not have qualms with, which happened to be math and science. As a scientist by profession himself, he regarded this type of work as worthwhile. Alina did not genuinely find this subject as compelling as drawing, but forced herself to study it. When she got to college, she majored in accounting and took a job afterwards at a firm. She majored in accounting in college and took a job at such a firm upon graduating. Deep inside, she still felt stifled and as though she was not allowed to live the way she really wanted to. She had moved to a different town after college and saw her father only on holidays now. One night after work, she heard an ad on a podcast for therapy that got her thinking. She thought, maybe I should go talk to someone. I don't feel good, I know that. Maybe counseling could help. Well, as she did this and filled out the paperwork before her first session, one of the questions she was asked to fill out asked her how satisfied she was in her current occupation. She surprised herself with her honesty and selected not at all. In the first session, her therapist inquired, I saw that you're not satisfied with your current work as an accountant. Can you tell me a little more? Alina said, yeah, well, I just don't get any joy from accounting. Her therapist asked, well, why do you do it then? Alina said, well, it feels like I'm not supposed to enjoy what I do. Like the way I know I'm doing legitimate work is if I don't enjoy it. I see, said her therapist. If this rule were not in place and legitimate work could be anything, what do you think you'd choose to do? Drawing, no question, Alina blurted out. She felt a surge of relief and terror as she said this. From this moment on, Alina and her therapist would focus on what it was like for her to re-engage in drawing as part of her life. Alina decided to try to devote 30 minutes per night to drawing. As she tried to do this, she registered feeling scared. She wasn't sure why, but she knew that the fear grew the more she drew. The only way to relieve it was to distract herself from drawing. If she strung together 3 nights of successfully drawing, something else would sweep over her. She would feel a vague but powerful block from drawing a 4th night in a row. She'd question whether she really liked drawing as much as she thought she did. But she also wondered if these thoughts were a means towards the end of interrupting her momentum with drawing. When Alina finished a drawing, she would often not know what to do with herself. None of her friends or coworkers knew that she liked to draw. She and her therapist grew to understand why she kept this part of herself secret. She never saw herself as an artist. To be creating art like she was while having no sense that this was part of her identity felt disconcerting. She knew herself to be someone who struggled in life. Doing what she loved and finding fulfillment in it did not fit into who she knew herself to be. Alina would feel lost as she reintroduced drawing into her life and her self-concept. How scapegoat survivors can find it safe to be creative. Well, a scapegoat child had to turn down the volume on their creative impulses and turn up the volume on their parents' messages that they were defective. In order to find it safe to be creative, the scapegoat survivor needs to first rediscover those creative impulses. This process involves turning away from their parents' loud, harmful messages. Next, they must turn inward towards their own creative voice. Turning inward used to mean risking the 3 punishments I described earlier. As the survivor discovers that these punishments no longer occur, they can feel safer to turn up the volume on their creative impulses. The process of turning inward can feel fraught. The scapegoat survivor has had to deny that they possess value internally for so long. The result can be a belief that they are empty inside, and may even feel this way upon first turning towards oneself. Here's where therapy can be particularly helpful. In an ongoing therapy, you get the experience of someone being there when you pay attention to yourself. Not just a warm body, but an empathic mind that is interested and supportive of you feeling connected to what is within. This type of presence counters the 3 punishments experienced with a narcissistic parent. You get to see that you are not attacked, you are recognized, and your creativity is positively responded to. Well, let's go back to Alina one more time. Over a few years in therapy, she made more room for creativity in her life and her identity. First, by talking with her therapist about her desire to draw, they were acknowledging this as a valid aspect of who she was. The problem was the 3 feared punishments that interfered with her embracing these creative impulses. Her therapist's continued benign interest in what mattered to Alina helped counter the fear of attack. Alina learned gradually that she did not have to hide her creativity to prevent her therapist from attacking her. This helped Alina feel less anxious when she sat down to draw. Alina was able to take in her therapist's view of her also. She knew that her therapist saw her as a decent, creative, and resilient person. This was evident in the ways her therapist treated her and responded to her. Now, when Alina exercised her creativity, she could still feel like she was someone to somebody. Alina made use of her therapist's affirmation of her creative expressions to be able to feel more real when she created. Her passion for drawing felt, again, over time, like an activity that helped her feel more instead of less like herself. She no longer felt lost when she was creative. Well, thank you again for tuning in today. I hope you found today's video helpful. If you are a scapegoat survivor and have found yourself struggling with the creative process and yet yearn to create, I think that it's quite understandable how those challenges can arise. But that also, I think there's good reason for hope that, in ongoing safe relationships, that the fears can be relieved as new information is experienced and internalized in these kinds of relationships. Well, I want to thank you all for your continued engagement with this channel, your continued support of one another in the comments section here, and again, courageous explanations of your own journeys in recovering from this form of abuse, and also support of one another in each other's journey. It's just been really, really great to see. I know I say that every week, but I mean it every week. So, and with that, I look forward to posting a new long form video next Friday. Take care.